Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel General Hospital today. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The somber, hushed atmosphere of the grand funeral parlor was a testament to the life of Edward Grayson Hartford. The air, thick with the cloying scent of lilies and expensive perfume, seemed to absorb the muted sobs and whispered condolences. Photographs of Edward, from a dashing young entrepreneur to a silver-haired patriarch, were displayed with tasteful reverence. In the front row, Monica Hartford, the widow, sat as still as a marble statue. Her black veil did little to conceal the profound emptiness in her eyes, a void carved out by equal parts grief and the sheer exhaustion of enduring a marriage that had long since become a gilded cage. Her son, Gabriel, sat protectively beside her, his jaw clenched, his hand covering hers in a gesture that was both comforting and possessive. He was the heir, the dutiful son who had stayed, and the entire room knew it. The eulogies had been a predictable parade of business associates and distant relatives, each painting a portrait of Edward as a titan of industry, a visionary. They spoke of his building an empire from nothing, his shrewd business acumen, his philanthropy. They carefully omitted the decades of infidelity, the coldness that could freeze a room, the brutal business tactics that had left ruins in his wake. Monica listened, her expression unreadable behind the veil. She was counting the minutes until she could retreat to the silence of the manor, to begin the arduous task of unpacking a life entangled with his, and to secure the future she and Gabriel had meticulously planned. The minister was just about to invite the final prayer, a signal that the ordeal was nearly over, when the heavy oak doors at the back of the hall creaked open. A shaft of afternoon light cut through the dim stained glass gloom, silhouetting a tall, broad-shouldered figure. All heads turned. A murmur, faint at first, then growing in volume, rippled through the congregation. This was not a latecomer. This was an intrusion. The man walked with a confident, almost insolent stride, his footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. He was dressed not in the formal black of the other mourners, but in a well-tailored, dark gray suit that suggested money, but money earned elsewhere, without the constraints of Hartford tradition. His face was tanned, lined around the eyes as if from squinting into suns on distant horizons. He had the Hartford jawline, unmistakably, and the same intense blue eyes that had once belonged to Edward. But where Edward's eyes had been cold and calculating, this man's held a fire, a simmering intensity that was both compelling and dangerous. He walked right down the central aisle, ignoring the whispered questions, the gasps of recognition from the older family members who saw the ghost of a younger Edward in his features. He didn't stop until he reached the open casket. He looked down at the composed, waxen face of his father for a long, silent moment. The room held its breath. Then he did something that sent a fresh wave of shock through the crowd. He didn't bow his head. He didn't make the sign of the cross. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips before he turned away from the casket and his gaze landed squarely on Monica. The color drained from her face so completely that Gabriel feared she might faint. Her knuckles gripping her purse were white. She knew. Even after 25 years, even through the veil of time and what she had desperately hoped was permanent exile, she knew him. "Mother," the man said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that carried to every corner of the silent room. "Gabriel, my condolences. It's a shame I didn't make it in time for a proper family reunion before the end." Gabriel shot to his feet, his body vibrating with a mixture of confusion and rage. "Who the hell are you? How dare you disrupt this service?" The stranger's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm hurt, little brother. You don't remember me? Though I suppose you were barely out of diapers. The name's Alexander. Alexander Hartford. The prodigal son, you could say. Though I prefer the term, the disinherited one. But now that dear old dad is gone, I believe it's time to discuss what's rightfully mine." The word disinherited hung in the air, more shocking than any profanity. The Hartford fortune was the stuff of legend, a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning shipping, real estate, and technology. The will, as everyone assumed, was a mere formality. Everything would go to Monica for her lifetime, and then to Gabriel, the son who had been groomed for leadership since birth. The existence of another son, an heir, was a secret buried deeper than Edward Hartford himself. Monica finally found her voice a strained, thin sound. Alexander, this is not the time or the place. On the contrary, Mother, Alexander countered, his tone deceptively smooth. This is the perfect place. All the key players are here. The grieving widow. The loyal heir. The family lawyer, I see him over there looking decidedly pale. And all the witnesses. He swept a hand around the room. It saves me the trouble of sending out announcements. I'm back. And I'm claiming my share. Gabriel took a step forward, his fists clenched. You have no share. You are nobody. My father only had one son. Me. Is that what he told you? Alexander laughed, a short, harsh sound. Convenient. Ask your mother about the summer of '99. Ask her why her firstborn son was banished from this family the moment he turned 18 with nothing but a suitcase and a one-way ticket to nowhere. Ask her about the clause in the trust fund. Or better yet, he said, turning his piercing gaze back to the family lawyer, Mr. Sterling, we can let the will speak for itself. I assume you'll be reading it after the burial, as is tradition? I'll be there. With that, Alexander gave a mock salute, turned on his heel, and walked back up the aisle, leaving a tsunami of chaos in his wake. The dignified funeral of Edward Hartford had been utterly shattered, reduced to a juicy, scandalous prelude to a war. The car ride to the family cemetery was conducted in a thick, suffocating silence. Monica stared out the window, seeing nothing. Gabriel alternated between furious phone calls to his security team and his father's most trusted advisors, demanding to know who this imposter was and how he had been allowed to get so close. The graveside service was a blur, a perfunctory ritual overshadowed by the palpable curiosity and greed in the eyes of the other mourners. The story was already spreading, a wildfire of gossip that would soon engulf the city. An hour later, the key members of the Hartford family and their legal counsel were assembled in the oppressive opulence of the Hartford Manor's main study. The room was a monument to Edward's power. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that were never read, mahogany paneling, a massive desk that had been the site of countless ruthless business deals. Monica sat in a high-backed chair, her veil finally off, revealing a face aged by shock. Gabriel stood behind her, a sentinel. Mr. Sterling, a man in his late 60s with a perpetually worried expression, sat opposite them, a thick, legal document placed on the desk before him. The door opened without a knock. Alexander strode in as if he owned the place. He had shed his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle and adorned with faded tattoos that hinted at a life far removed from boardrooms and polo matches. He helped himself to a glass of Edward's finest scotch from the crystal decanter, swirling it appreciatively before taking a seat. "Shall we?" he said, as if he were chairing the meeting. "This is a private reading for the immediate family," Gabriel snapped. "Which I am," Alexander replied calmly. "Or did you think I came all this way for the canapes? Mr. Sterling, if you please." The lawyer cleared his throat nervously, adjusting his glasses. "Yes, well, as the executor of the late Mr. Hartford's last will and testament, dated July 14th of last year, I am bound to read it in the presence of the named beneficiaries." He began the formal preamble, his voice a dry monotone. The will was, as expected, extensive, detailing bequests to charities, loyal employees, and distant relatives. Gabriel listened impatiently, waiting for the core of the matter. Finally, Mr. Sterling reached the crucial section. "And now to the disposition of my residuary estate, comprising the entirety of my shares in Hartford Holdings, my real property holdings, and my liquid assets." He paused, taking a sip of water. "To my wife, Monica Hartford, I leave the primary residence, Hartford Manor, along with a lifetime annual allowance of $20 million, to be drawn from the estate's revenues." Monica gave a slight, acknowledging nod. It was what she had expected. "To my son, Gabriel Hartford, I bequeath the entirety of my controlling interest in Hartford Holdings, making him the majority shareholder and chief executive officer, with all the rights and responsibilities therein." A wave of relief washed over Gabriel. It was done. He was the heir. He allowed himself a tight, triumphant smile in Alexander's direction. But Alexander's expression hadn't changed. He simply raised an eyebrow, as if waiting for the punchline. Mr. Sterling continued, his voice growing even more hesitant. However, this bequest to Gabriel is contingent upon a specific condition. The room went still. The condition, Mr. Sterling read, is that my son Gabriel shall acknowledge and integrate his older brother, Alexander Michael Hartford, whom I formally acknowledge as my biological son, back into the family and the business. Gabriel's smile vanished. What? Furthermore, Mr. Sterling pressed on, visibly sweating now, I hereby grant to my son Alexander Hartford a 25% stake in Hartford Holdings with full voting rights. This stake is to be transferred immediately upon the probate of this will. Additionally, I grant him ownership of the family's waterfront properties, including the summer estate in Newport. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Gabriel looked as if he had been physically struck. Monica let out a small choked cry. This is outrageous. Gabriel exploded, slamming his hand on the desk. It's a forgery. That bastard. He glared at Alexander. You did this. You manipulated a dying old man. Alexander finally spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. I hadn't seen or spoken to our father for 25 years, Gabriel. You were the one by his side. If anyone manipulated him, it was you. Or perhaps, he turned his gaze to Monica, our dear mother. Monica flinched. The will has been authenticated, Mr. Sterling said meekly. It was witnessed by 2 partners from my firm and a notary public. It is legally binding. 25%? Gabriel seethed. He gets a quarter of my company for doing nothing? For being born and then causing nothing but trouble. Our company, Alexander corrected him. And I didn't get it for doing nothing. I got it for being his son. The son he threw away. Consider it back pay for a quarter century of neglect. You'll never get away with this, Gabriel snarled. I'll contest this will. I'll tie it up in courts for decades. You'll be an old man before you see a single cent. You can try, Alexander said, finishing his scotch and standing up. But I've got nothing but time. And from what I hear, Hartford Holdings has several very delicate mergers in the pipeline. A protracted public legal battle with the newly discovered heir? The shareholders would love that. The stock would plummet. You'd be risking the very empire you're so desperate to protect. He leaned forward, planting his hands on the desk. I'm not here to destroy the family business, little brother. I'm here to claim my piece of it. You can either accept that and we can find a way to work together, or you can fight me and watch everything our father built crumble to dust. The choice is yours. He straightened up and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back to Monica. Oh, and mother? I'll be moving into the Newport estate. I trust that's acceptable. It always did have the best view. And the best memories. The door closed behind him, leaving Gabriel and Monica in a state of shell-shocked paralysis. The carefully constructed future had evaporated in the space of a few minutes. The empire was no longer solely theirs. A ghost from the past had not only returned but had laid claim to the throne room. The funeral was over, but the real battle for the Hartford legacy had just begun. In the days and weeks that followed, the Hartford mansion became a war room. Gabriel, fueled by a potent mix of betrayal and fury, assembled a team of the most ruthless lawyers in the country. Their mission to invalidate the will. They dug into Alexander's past, searching for any ammunition they could find. The picture that emerged was fragmented but troubling. Alexander Hartford had not been living a quiet life. After being cast out, he had bounced around Europe and Asia, working on cargo ships, in casinos, and in security for shadowy figures whose names were whispered in connection with organized crime. There were gaps in his history, years that were unaccounted for. There were rumors of involvement in black market trading, of brushes with the law in countries with lax extradition treaties. He was a chameleon, a survivor, a man who had built his own fortune through means that were decidedly outside the Hartford playbook. He was, in short, dangerous. Monica, meanwhile, retreated into a state of quiet despair. The appearance of Alexander had unlocked a vault of memories she had spent a lifetime trying to seal shut. She remembered the bright, sensitive boy he had been, so different from his stern, demanding father. She remembered the arguments, the escalating rebellions. Alexander had seen through Edward's facade from a young age, and he had not been afraid to challenge him. The final straw had been a violent confrontation over a girl from the wrong side of the tracks, a confrontation that had ended with Edward giving his 18-year-old son an ultimatum: leave quietly and never return, or be publicly disgraced and cut off without a cent. Monica, trapped by her own fear and dependence on Edward, had stood by and said nothing. She had chosen Gabriel, the younger, more pliable son, and the security of the Hartford name. The guilt had eaten away at her for 25 years, and now it had manifested in the flesh, demanding repayment with interest. Gabriel's legal challenges hit one wall after another. Edward, in his final year, had been meticulous. The will was ironclad. The acknowledgement of paternity was backed by DNA evidence Edward had secretly obtained. The witnesses were unimpeachable. The probate court was moving forward, and Alexander's 25% stake was on the verge of being officially transferred. Frustrated by the legal dead end, Gabriel decided on a different tactic. He arranged a meeting with Alexander man-to-man at a neutral location, a private club where the Hartfords had long held a membership. The two brothers faced each other across a table, the air between them crackling with hostility. "This is your last chance to be reasonable," Gabriel began, trying to sound authoritative. "Take a one-time lump sum payment. 100 million. Cash. You walk away, you change your name, and you disappear forever. It's more money than you could ever spend." Alexander laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh that held no mirth. 100 million? For a quarter of a company worth tens of billions? You insult me, Gabriel. And you underestimate me. I don't want your payoff. I want what's mine. I want a seat at the table. I want a voice. You have no idea how to run a business like Hartford Holdings, Gabriel scoffed. You've been a hired thug your whole life. I've run operations that would make your head spin, Alexander retorted. I've negotiated with warlords and smugglers. I think I can handle a boardroom full of suits. Besides, I'm a quick study. And I have a very personal interest in the company's success. After all, I'm a major shareholder now. I will never let you set foot in the headquarters, Gabriel said, his voice low and venomous. You don't have a choice, Alexander replied. The will grants me full voting rights. I can show up to the next board meeting and vote you out as CEO if I can rally enough of the other shareholders. And given how you've been running things lately, that might not be as hard as you think. This was a bluff, Gabriel was sure, but it was a dangerous one. The mere suggestion of instability could spook investors. What do you really want, Alexander? Gabriel asked, his composure finally cracking. Revenge? For what? For a father who didn't love you? Join the club. He didn't love anyone. He loved power. That's all. This isn't about revenge, Alexander said, his eyes narrowing. This is about justice. It's about rectifying a wrong. And it's about her. He gestured vaguely in the direction of the Hartford manor. She stood by and let him do it. She chose you. She chose the money, the safety over her own son. Well, now the money is mine too. And I'm not going anywhere. The meeting ended in a stalemate. The war would continue. As the legal and corporate battles raged, a more subtle psychological war began within the walls of the manor. Alexander started visiting Monica. At first, his visits were brief and formal, under the pretext of discussing property transfers. But soon they became longer, more frequent. He would arrive unannounced, bringing flowers or a bottle of wine, and he would talk to her. He didn't shout or accuse. Instead, he reminisced. He would bring up small, poignant memories from his childhood. A birthday party, a trip to the zoo, a story she used to read to him at bedtime. He was expertly chipping away at her defenses, weaponizing nostalgia and guilt. Monica, starved for a connection to the son she had lost, and crushed by the weight of her past sin, found herself weakening. She began to see the man he had become, the strength and resilience that his hard life had forged. She also saw the deep, unhealed wound that festered beneath his confident exterior. Part of her wanted to reach out, to beg for forgiveness, to explain the impossible position she had been in. Another part, the part that was still Gabriel's mother, knew that any softening towards Alexander was a betrayal of the son who had stayed. Gabriel watched this development with growing alarm. He saw the conflicted look in his mother's eyes, heard the way she sometimes spoke of Alexander with a hint of pity, even sympathy. He realized that Alexander was not just fighting for shares, he was fighting for their mother's soul. And in doing so, he was threatening to tear the very fabric of the family apart from the inside. The conflict came to a head during a tense family dinner that Gabriel had insisted upon, a desperate attempt to present a united front. It was a disaster from the start. The conversation was stilted, filled with long, uncomfortable silences. "So, Alexander," Monica said, trying to make polite conversation, "have you settled into the Newport house?" "It's coming along," Alexander replied, his eyes on Gabriel. "Needs some updating. The place is frozen in time. Just like this family. Some of us value tradition," Gabriel shot back. "Some of us are trapped by it," Alexander countered. The argument escalated quickly, moving from veiled insults to open accusations. "You're poisoning her against me," Gabriel finally shouted, pointing at his mother. "I'm not doing anything you haven't done yourself," Alexander said calmly. "You've spent your whole life being the perfect son, following in his footsteps, becoming a colder, harder version of him. Can't you see what it's done to her? Can't you see she's a prisoner in this gilded cage, just as much as I was in exile?" Monica began to cry soft, helpless sobs. "Please stop. Both of you." But it was too late. The truth had been unleashed. Gabriel saw the accusation in Alexander's words, and worse, he saw a flicker of agreement in his mother's tear-filled eyes. In that moment, he knew that the battle was no longer just about the company. It was about the past and which version of it would define the future. He had built his identity on being the good son, the rightful heir. Alexander's presence invalidated all of that, suggesting that Gabriel's inheritance was not a reward for merit, but the spoils of his mother's cruel choice.